So welcome to the Beyond the Device podcast, where we explore the life-defining moments that shape careers within the medical device industry. We are particularly interested in understanding how personal experiences, challenges, or pivotal events influence professional journeys. And as we progress through the conversation, we will eventually land on the question, what is the one defining moment or experience in your life that changed everything and set you on the path today? Our guest today is someone that we've known for as long as we've been in the industry. She's the director and principal consultant of SQMS, which is a medical device QMS consultancy, specializing in helping startup companies establish and then gain certification for their QMS. For anyone that knows her, she is a true gem within the medical device industry, and she really goes above and beyond to help the people around her. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Sam Shelley. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you. Glowing reference.
Welcome, Sam.
Yeah.
And Duncan. Hi.
So those that will know the CAPU community will know that Sam is a two-time winner of our MVP award, and knowing the work that she does in the industry and outside of the industry, as she was just telling us, I'm sure she's probably the MVP for a lot of other people as well. So we're really grateful to have you on, Sam. But what we want to talk about is, how did you get there? And this is a conversation about your journey, the lessons that people can take from the turns that you've made in your career, and those pivotal moments. But if you can just take us back to the start, and we'll talk about some early influences. So where did life begin for Sam Shelley?
Life began with sort of like a little fork in the road, just as I was leaving school from doing my O-levels. I applied for two jobs. One was a mechanical engineering apprenticeship, and the other one was to be an aircraft technician on Tornadoes with the Ministry of Defence, not the RAF. And I was very keen on both roles, probably more keen on the Tornado role, it has to be said. But unfortunately, the MOD move at a pace slower than even the MHRA. And so I had actually given up. I didn't think that I got through. And so I accepted my apprenticeship. And 2 weeks after I signed my indenture papers, I got notified that I'd been successful in my application to become an aircraft technician, and I had to turn it down. So I ended up going into mechanical engineering in the 1980s. And it was a kind of a strange time to be a woman in mechanical engineering. I was the only girl on the apprenticeship course. I was the only girl on the course at the local college where I was doing my ONC and HNC. They didn't even have a ladies' toilets in the engineering block. I had to go to the arts and crafts block in the college to go to the loo on my breaks, which nowadays would be unthinkable. And it was during my apprenticeship that I actually specialised in quality control and quality assurance. And I think the kind of what honed me in on that aspect of any kind of a business is the fact that you can actually prevent things from going wrong by kind of considering the risks of what could go wrong and putting mitigation in first. Which, I mean, back in the 1980s, back in the good old days of BS 5750, the original quality standard, that was still quite a groundbreaking thing for businesses. But yeah, that's how I started on quality, which led me down the road into various other markets and eventually into medical devices.
And even pre that, what influences in your childhood took you on that path of education into study, then into industry? Like what was the exposure at an early stage?
Well, I was brought up in a household where my mum was living with her mother and two of her brothers. And both of her brothers were very much into mechanicking. So one of them had a motorbike, the other one was constantly tinkering with cars. And so I was used to following my uncles around outside where they'd be on crawl boards underneath a car, or they'd be taking a bike carburetor to pieces in the kitchen. And I kind of very, very quickly, at a very young age, I learned to scoot around on a tea tray on my back on the floor, under things, and undo things that I probably shouldn't have done, like wing nuts on coffee tables. And things like that. And as soon as I could, you know how children have sort of like that little plastic box with like giant nuts and bolts and screws and things and a big plastic screwdriver. Well, I was doing that with the real thing from as soon as I could crawl. So I think I kind of, being constantly surrounded by the smell of like engine oil and bits and pieces degreasing in a plastic bucket in the kitchen. Yeah, I think it was kind of pretty much ingrained into me at a very young age. And I also had
Raised in
this
a
kind of,
garage.
kind of, but I also had this from a very early age, a really keen interest in how do things work? Why do things work? I was constantly taking things apart and putting them back together again. Even things like a good old-fashioned alarm clock, with the big bells on the top. And some things I was successful with, and some things I was less than successful with. Three bar electric fire, I successfully repaired until it blew up.
And when you eventually landed into the medical device industry, did did things just click and you thought this is the industry I needed to be in? I just didn't know it yet. Like how did that final step happen?
Well, my first step into medical devices was with a company that actually had three different product streams, and only one of them was medical. And this was in the early 1990s. So this is actually this tied up with the introduction of the EU Medical Device Directive, which was applicable in the UK at the time. And so we suddenly had to bring our products in line with the regulation. There were some changes around the quality management system as well. And I think at that point, it really kind of that part of my interest in how things work includes the human body. Fascinated by psychology as well as physiology, and so to actually be working with a product that had impact on people's lives, patients' lives, um, that was fascinating in its own right. And I think when I was looking to move on from that organisation, I didn't think for a moment about going for another company that wasn't a medical device company.
Yeah, we hear that quite a lot. People work in different industries, they get one project or one role within medical devices or life sciences, and then that's where they tend to stay. So that's very normal. Um, Thanks for giving us the sort of early years of your career. Are you able to share a defining moment or maybe an experience, something that happened that sort of changed everything for you and set you on the path that you're on today?
Um, well, the there was one event that set me on my path to setting up my consultancy. Um, but there was one before that that was nothing to do with medical devices, but it was a key learning point for me. I had recently joined a business, not a medical device business, and was quite happily working with them. It was coming towards the end of my probationary period when I got headhunted for an operations management role. And at that time, I hadn't kind of really embedded myself into medical devices completely. And I'd always wanted an opportunity to try operations. When you work in quality management, you get to know how the entire business works because you're helping to document the processes. And it really did seem to be a too good to be true opportunity. 20% pay rise, in an industry that I was familiar with from a manufacturing perspective, and so I jumped for it. Um, when I went for the interview, um, the offer was put to me at the end of the interview, and I was told, if you can start in a week, the job's yours. If you can't start in a week, there is no offer. And that should have been an enormous red flag for me. But I was
Yeah.
naive, I was fired up, I was keen, and I went through it. And because by that point I was a week out of my probationary period with the company I was currently working for, they actually held back my last month's salary on the basis that I breached contract because I was supposed to give a month's notice. But the new company reimbursed me that, so I wasn't out of pocket, and it all seemed good. When I joined the company, the first week I was there, the managing director sort of said, this is what the role encompasses, this is what we want you to do, set me out some key performance indicators for my 3 months probationary period. Yep, all good. And then at the beginning of the second week, he said to me, can I ask why you're not attending all the shift handover meetings? Now, this is a company that had got continentals, so 12-hour shifts, and also had 3 shifts. And the Continentals ran 7 days a week, and the 3 shifts ran Monday to Friday. So effectively, the shift handovers were 6 a.m., 8 a.m., 2 p.m., 8 p.m., and 10 p.m. And this managing director genuinely wanted me to be at all of those. So he wanted me on site attending meetings from 6 a.m. until 10 p.m. And within, oh gosh, another week after that, I was actually sleeping in my office more times than I was actually making it home, because I had a scary experience when I was driving home at something like midnight, having only had 4 hours of sleep the night before, and I was hallucinating things in the road, and I scared myself. So I started sleeping in my office more often than actually making it home. And on the last day of my 3 months probation, I got called into the office to meet with the MD and the head of HR, and I thought, this is great. I'd actually exceeded the KPIs, and I thought, this is great. I'm going to be signed off my probation. And they just slid a letter across the table telling me that they were letting me go because I was unable to competently carry out the role. And I was stunned, absolutely stunned. I was literally marched out of the office into my office to pick up my stuff and escorted off site. And I found out from the company that had recruited me in, who'd also been stiffed by the company on the fee, that they'd actually got somebody for the role, but that person had got 3 months notice period. And that person started the day after they booted me out. And that was, heart in mouth, never even had so much as a verbal warning my entire career to that point. And all of a sudden, I'm out the door, 6 weeks pay. That was astounding. My family stepped in.
Do you know if the I was going to say, do you know how the other person got on?
I don't know, because the one thing I've learned in life is learn from something and move on. Don't regret it, because regret doesn't change anything. Regret doesn't allow you to go in the past and change what you did. Learn from it, move on. Don't make the same mistake twice. I think I've seen too many people whose lives have been just totally absorbed by regret, reliving things that have gone wrong in the past that they can't change. And rather than moving forward, they end up stuck in this little loop where they keep reliving that experience. But yeah, my family kind of pulled around me, my friends pulled around me. I stepped straight into the company that recruited me was a very newly set up recruitment company. And the lady who'd set that up said to me, right, come live with me, help me start up my business. I'll cover, you'll be paid board and lodgings, till we start pulling in more recruitment, more fees, etc. And so I went and lived with her for 3 months and helped her set her business up before then finding another job to move on to myself. But yeah, so that was what that taught me, was if it looks too good to be true, don't ignore the red flags. If it doesn't feel right, don't ignore those gut feelings. Gut feelings play a huge part in how you're going to feel about a role when you go into it. And no matter how catastrophic that event was, I had friends and I had family, so it wasn't the end of my world. It felt like it at the time, but it was not, and I was able to regroup and move forward from that. But probably, sorry, Ali.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, fast forward to the decision to set up your own company, because it sounds like there was something that happened there that would be interesting to hear.
Absolutely. So I had exited a company because of a conflict of interest, and whilst I was on garden leave from that position, I was headhunted for a startup role, and I joined the startup. I was a bit confused to start off with because there didn't seem to be anything for me to do, and 6 weeks into that job, having been told during my weekly reviews, great job I was doing, introducing myself to the team and getting to learn all about the disease that they were working with and the technology. The product was still in concept. They didn't even have a working prototype. And then, I walked in one morning and they said, we're really sorry, we're going to have to let you go because there's nothing for you to do. And they'd actually hired me purely to satisfy a milestone on their grant, their Innovate grant. So rather than actually going to Innovate and saying, look, we've wrongly estimated the timeline for this, they'd gone ahead and hired me and then fired me. And that was 2 weeks before Christmas. And they rather generously said, oh, don't worry, we'll pay you to the end of the month, which was, really great. So I went home and told my husband what happened, and he said, right, well, obviously we're not going to say anything to the family. We don't want parents worrying over Christmas. Um, we've got enough savings to be able to cope for 6 months, 9 months if we've pulled the belt in a bit. You know, have a long, hard think about what you want to do. I went out to a number of recruiters before the Christmas period, got 3 interviews lined up, and was successful on all 3 interviews, got 3 offers. And the first 2 I turned down on the basis that I could see myself going through the same loop, you know, going into a company, fixing all the problems 2 years later, wanting to move on again. And I'd sat down over Christmas and thought, God, there's got to be a job out there where I can change jobs frequently and nobody's going to bat an eyelid. And I thought I'd gone to a conference in the November, and I'd been talking in one of the coffee sessions to a number of people who were saying like, oh God, you know, we're startups. We thought we were months from putting a product onto the market, and we didn't know we needed to have this, and we didn't know we needed to do that. And when we've gone out to try to get support, it's so expensive and we can't afford it. And I sat there over Christmas thinking, there isn't kind of a pay-as-you-go service for quality and regulatory for startups, which is what you need. When you're a startup, you need somebody right at the very beginning to sit down and say, right, this is what it looks like to become a medical device manufacturer or a medical device developer. This is what your life is going to look like. And these are things you need to think about right at the very start, because this is going to be your decision as to whether this is something that's going to be feasible personally and financially. Um, and then once you've had that first session, you may not actually then engage with somebody for months or even over a year whilst you are working on your concept, looking at whether there's a market for it, building that feasibility study, maybe even starting with your prototype. And at that point, you need to know, okay, so is it a medical device? What class is it? What are the regulations that are going to affect me for which markets I want to put it on? What other things do I need to know at this point? And that's when you need to switch your support back on again. And so I went to the third offer that I had, and I said to this company, I'd like to accept your offer. However, there's not enough work there for one person full time. So how about I do 20 hours a week for you, 20 hours a week setting up my consultancy. This is what I want to do. And they were really supportive. So that's how I started. I started off literally doing 20 hours a week in a temporary job, and 20 hours a week initially starting up, going out there. I landed some contract roles to start off with, so contract quality manager, contract regulatory manager. But at the end of my first year, so 26th of January 2015, I incorporated. So in January 2016, I was like, okay, so the contract thing's not really floating my boat. What is it I actually want to do? I actually want to help startups. So I need to think about what is my marketing strategy, what is the service I want to offer, what are the companies I want to make contact with and engage with. And so over the first sort of 3 years of my business, I kind of molded it into this pay-as-you-go quality and regulatory consultancy service. So, you know, I started to engage with universities like UCL, and started to work with some of their very early stage spin-outs that were at concept and feasibility stage, doing that educational bit, sort of, guys, this is what it's going to look like. And fast forward to today, had my 10-year anniversary this January. Seem to have a constantly full client board, generally between 12 and 14 clients at any one time, all at different stages. So I've got one client that was bought by Olympus for a huge sum of millions of pounds, tens, I think it was 66 million. Oh, it was just like, I never seen a huge number.
Yeah, I
Last
think
year.
I think I know who you're talking about.
You know who
We
I'm
work
talking
with them
about,
as
yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Yes.
And all of, but the great thing for me is that all of my clients have been personal referrals from other clients that I've had. So that for me is fantastic. I never have to go out and look for work. Work comes looking for me, and I often am approached by more clients than I can handle. So I do work with a network of colleagues that I'm happy with the service that they can provide, and so I introduce my potential clients to them so that they can be supported appropriately. Um, but for me, it was really about stepping back and going, well, okay, I'm not really happy with what I've been doing career-wise up to this point. I recognize the fact that I'm not going to be a person that is in one job doing the same thing for 20 years. That's not me.
Yeah.
So, what are my needs, and can I see a market opportunity out there where these would fit in quite nicely?
And that sounds like a very sort of logical thing to think, but at the time of being told you're being let go, which is for a second time, how did you actually feel in that moment?
Um, they talk about the world, the bottom dropping out of your world, or your heart in your stomach, and it very much felt like that driving. And on that occasion, they did it in the morning, first thing in the morning. So literally, I just turned up for work, and then it was turn around and off you go kind of thing. So I'm kind of driving home again, going, "Oh, this is really weird." So phone call to the husband, and it was. My husband is so pragmatic. He's so accepting of the strange and wonderful person that I am and all my weirdness. And so he's really stoic, and he just kind of takes it on the chin. Okay, right. Well, let's kind of work this through, which is fantastic. He's an absolute. Oh, he's my stake in the ground. He really is. Especially with something like that where I couldn't talk to my mum, I couldn't talk to my dad, I couldn't talk to his family. I spoke to a couple of my really close friends. Um, but for me, I don't know. I've always kind of had this, when the proverbial hits the fan, you take a moment, you take a breath, you roll your sleeves up, you get the bucket and the mop, and you just start. So I'm very lucky that I've never had anything happen in my life that's kind of not made me incapable, that's knocked me absolutely flat, where I can't get out of bed, where I can't think straight, where I can't do something, where I can't formulate an action plan and move forwards. But I think I was brought up by a combination of my mum and my grandmother for my very young years. And I was brought up in a household where I was not mollycoddled. I was kind of like a late addition to a family that had already had 7 kids, and some who were grown up and serving in the armed forces by the time I came along. And so, I was very much, my grandmother taught me to play piano from as soon as I could sit upright. I could read sheet music before I could read and write. Um, she used to tie me using a scarf to the chair in front of the piano so I couldn't fall off. And she would just get on with what she had to do. She would get on with the housework and the cooking and the cleaning and everything because she could tell that I wasn't busy taking the wing nuts off the coffee table because she could hear me playing the piano. So I had a very I was taught from a very young age to be independent. If you
Mm.
want to know something, go away and find out about it. Don't go and ask somebody, go and find out. I learned to read and write before I went to infant school, and my early books were the Encyclopedia Britannica and about a lifetime's worth of those monthly Reader's Digest books that my nan had. So I had a very strange reading introduction to life. Maybe that's where my interest in medical things come from, because every month in the Reader's Digest there was like, "I'm Jane's pancreas, I'm John's brain" kind of articles. But yeah, so I had a very it was kind of ingrained into me right from the start about independence, and self being responsible for yourself, being able to self rescue, knowing that you've got the family behind you if you need to fall back on them, but having that kind of robustness. I don't think you
I
can
think we
teach
see
that.
that a lot in contractors, whether they know it or not, but somewhere in their journey they've had to become independent young, or they've just been brought up in that kind of environment. Because when you think about the switch from permanent to contracting, it is on you.
Mm,
You can have the safety net of employment, or working in a team, and actually when you go it alone, you have to deliver that service. It is on you. Nathan and I had to make that decision ourselves, when we set up CAPU 4 years ago, but we'd spent so long talking to people in permanent jobs wanting to make that switch. And sometimes you speak to people and you think, yeah, you've got it. You'd be an amazing contractor from a technical perspective, but also just the individual. And then others you think, well, I'm not sure about that one. So
yeah.
all of these things, all of the stories that you've told us so far, we want to tie this back to some lessons. And you've got some quite reflective lessons around having the right people around you, your family, your friends, but when you were in it, perhaps you didn't see that. So is there anything that you've done intentionally to build that muscle, that resilience muscle? Is there any formal training or books that you've read? Like how have you become so resilient?
Well, that's a hard one. I think there's a stubbornness in my family which is genetic. So that stubbornness means that, it's going to happen regardless. No matter what the world wants and no matter what the world thinks, what my plan is going to happen. Um, when I started my own business, it's the first couple of years I did have jobs where I was on site. So I was on site with clients a lot. Then, of course, we had COVID, and all of a sudden everybody's working remotely, which has been fantastic. I absolutely love remote working. But one of the things that I think everybody experienced during the COVID isolation period was the fact that although we were able to carry on working, there was a huge chunk of the social aspect of work that just disappeared. And not just at work, but also just in life in general. And and because of my interest in psychology and why we do things the way we do things and how our brain works, and I'm a huge gadget freak. Oh my word, I have more gadgets than John Lewis. I really do. And so I got a Muse headband, which provides you with an EEG biofeedback for meditation. So the idea is it actually helps you to improve your meditation technique by providing you with biofeedback in the way of audio sounds when you're meditating. So the algorithm in the app knows what a calm brain looks like, and it also knows what a focused brain looks like. And there's two different sounds that are played, and depending on how calm you are and how focused you are depends on the noise levels. So I sort of recognized that my life at times was overly busy. At times I worked way too many hours, and at times I got pretty close to burnout. But I'm fairly what's the word, self-aware. So I was like, okay, so I need to start doing things to help protecting my own well-being. And so I started with the Muse headband and meditating at least once a day, sometimes twice a day, only for 5-10 minutes, but just enough to kind of like slow the brain down, give it a little bit of a break break from the madness that was going on. Um, and I've kind of built from that. So looking at other technology, there's a device called Mendy, which measures the blood flow and the temperature of the prefrontal cortex. So you can actually measure focus very clearly using that method. And again, it's an app, and you focus on an image on the app, and you get feedback on how that's working. Another thing that I introduced was journaling. I'm not a great journalist, but just having a journal, 10 minutes journaling in the morning, 10 minutes journaling in the evening. So in the morning, it's really about setting myself up for the day, making sure that I'm in the right frame of mind. And then in the evening, it's just reflecting on what's happened during the day, what went well, what didn't go well, lessons learned, and kind of like clearing the board ready for the next day. So I've listened to books on Audible because I run, and when I am driving as well. So and when I'm walking the dogs, so I do a lot of book listening to rather than book reading. Um, I find Mel Robbins' books, so her 5 Second Rule, the High Five Principle, um, were very
Hmm.
useful for me when I was approaching potential burnout. They helped me to kind of reset my boundaries. Um, there's a book called How to Be a Productivity Ninja by, I can never remember his name, oh, where is it? Where is it? Oh, it's on my bookshelf somewhere. Uh, oh gosh, I'm gonna have to find his name and send it to you afterwards.
I'm
But yeah,
sure
it's called
it'll
How
be the
to,
first book it'll be the first book
yeah,
you
it'll be
look
the
at
first
when
book that I
you
find
finish.
once we're off the call, yeah. But the guy's name, no, the book is called How to Be a Productivity Ninja. And I first listened to it on Audible, and I was so impressed I bought it. And then I was so further impressed I bought multiple copies of it, and I was giving it away to my startup CEOs. Um, it is a really insightful book. Probably aimed more at people who are setting up a company with multiple employees, but there was a lot in there that was very applicable to entrepreneurs. Um, And just really basically, my bookshelf is heaving with them. Yeah, high five, 5 second rule, high five habit, which is Mel Robbins. Stephen Covey's Seven Principles, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. It's an interesting read. Quite an entertaining read as well, actually. So that's one that I quite often go back to and will pick up and sort of flick through a chapter on there. But
I dip in and out of that on my Audible as well, and I just think
yeah,
it's just so much more accessible to these authors now, these books with Audible, with the guests on podcasts. Like, as you said, if you're driving, if you're exercising, there's so many more opportunities to dip into this content,
yeah,
and there's some great lessons in there. And you've been working with your consultancy for 10 years now. You've had to navigate changing market conditions, as we have, and we've seen a lot of people that are perhaps not in as fortunate position at the moment with the amount of clients they've got, the amount of work that comes to them. And we talk about resilience a lot on LinkedIn about what people can be doing with their job search. So maybe when you got into contracting 10 years ago, there wasn't as many contractors. I think the
mm.
profile of LinkedIn, and you can see how many people are out there. The conversation is constant at the moment about market conditions. But what advice would you give to contractors at the moment that are perhaps out of work or looking? What could they be doing?
I think well, it's a tricky one for me because I don't technically do contracting. It's more consulting, but it's the same thing in principle, I guess. So for me, and it's the same advice that I give to my startup entrepreneurs. Start off by recognizing what your expertise is, and then go out and look for a market where your expertise is required, which sounds pretty simple and pretty straightforward. But when it comes to if you want to design a successful medical device, you need to actually start by going out and finding a problem to solve. So don't start with inventing a solution and then go out and try and find a market for that solution. I've seen many companies fail doing that, including some really big ones. Um, but so for me as a contractor, it was really about recognizing that there was this massive gap in the market for what I was willing to offer. So I'm lucky that I've got the kind of the home life behind me and the financial back behind me, such that I could go pay as you go. I could go literally. It doesn't matter if I see this client for an hour now and don't see them for another year, because I've got multiple other clients and I can fill up my diary. I've always been very lucky that I've never been swamped. I've never taken on too much work. So I've always been able to accommodate the workload that I have, and I thank the career gods for that one. Um, but but for contractors, I would say, knowing that we are seeing more contractors out there, that the device market has been stifled by Brexit, has been stifled by changes to regulation, and it is quite a challenging environment. Um, I would say just if you're in a period where you don't have work, look at additional skills that you can pick up, look at additional learning that you can do. There's a whole host of free webinar availability out there from different companies. Make sure you're keeping up to date with organizations like BSI, where they quite often do seminars, free seminars and webinars and white papers and things that you're constantly updating yourself with regard to regulations and standards that apply to the role that you're doing, and just never stop learning, never stop learning. And worst case scenario, consider doing something which is maybe not your prime area of expertise, but something that you have sufficient experience and qualification in to be able to branch off to. Sometimes to go forwards, you have to turn right or left first.
And
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry, no, just the final bit on that as well is you seem to have really struck a balance with your passions outside of work as well. This isn't your complete identity. We know you as Sam from QA. But as you were telling us before this, there's so many Sams in other worlds where you're as important and pivotal. And we were joking about do you ever sleep? But it seems you do really have that balance, and that must take work. You've helped so many startups get off the ground and stay off the ground, and you've done it with your own as well. And
Yeah.
it seems like you've struck a real good balance between what you also enjoy outside of work. So I think
Yeah.
that's a great lesson people can take.
You do have to. One of the things that I learnt early on was because I came out of industry, out of being an employee where you had paid holidays and you were encouraged to take holidays and things, and then going into setting your own business up where you sometimes you barely sleep, let alone actually take a holiday. And I'm still really awful. I'm still really awful at taking time off. But what I tend to do now is that if we have a spell of good weather, then I'll take a few days off work if my diary's relatively blank, and I'll go and spend it down the allotment. Or if my husband takes time off at the same time, we'll take the dogs to the beach or to the woods, whatever. And we'll kind of we staycation. We're not great holidayers abroad. But the one thing that I learned early on is that I can't. My work life is so busy. My out of work life has to also be busy. I can't do 0 to 60, 60 to 0, 0 to 60, 60 to 0. It doesn't do me any good. It doesn't work for me. So I have found my sweet spot for sleep is about 5 to 6 hours. And I might throw a power nap in there occasionally if I feel the need for it. Um, but yeah, I'm the chair of the parish council, vice chair of the recreation committee. I'm a trustee on a village charitable trust. I'm an event director and run director for Park Run. I'm a bat rescuer and bat carer. I'm a scoutmaster. I'm a volunteer at the Heritage Centre, and I also kind of like head up our allotment group in the village. And all of those things, they're all pretty busy things that fill my days, fill my days and fill my evenings and fill my
If,
weekends.
if if anyone ever says that they don't have enough time,
Mm.
I'm just going to play them that snippet.
And
There's
then
always
just to
time.
chuck
There's always
in
time.
another role, which it felt like maybe a couple of years back, you were like our unofficial business development manager for CAPU. The amount of stuff you were sending our way as well. So
Oh
yeah.
yeah, I was gutted. I was gutted that I couldn't do as much last year, but unfortunately, my kind of there's a short cycle and a long cycle for my clients, and I'd reached this kind of bit where the two cycles are just juxtaposed, and I'd either got clients who were actually recruited up for their available funding at the point, or I had entrepreneurs who didn't actually have the money to recruit anybody. But I'm hoping I've definitely I've got a few clients on my books at the moment who I have high hopes for this year. So, and especially now you've
Cool.
branched out as well, some of them might not even be in the UK.
There we go. Well, I think like looking forward, both professionally and personally. Let's start with professionally first. Like, what is the future for you? Is it more of the same? Have you spotted other holes or gaps or problems that customers have that you're going to pivot and change? Or yeah, what's the future?
It's going to be hard. It would be hard to move away from what I currently do for startups because I work with some absolutely incredible entrepreneurs and scientists and clinicians. I'm working with some absolutely awesome, groundbreaking technology that I can't talk about. And that just floats so many of my boats. It's incredible. I do kind of try to look beyond the next 12 months as to what I want to do business wise. I'm cultivating a couple of relationships with things that may keep me in the same arena, but not necessarily doing the same role.
Yeah.
So it is something that I do keep an eye to. I am cultivating relationships with some of the bigger universities in the UK to try to encourage them to make sure that they are educating their designers and developers in their degree courses to make sure that they have a bit of an understanding about what goes on once you leave university with your great idea. Um, so, yeah, do I ever see myself retiring? Probably not. Would I like to spend more time down the allotment? Probably yes.
And
Hey, I've got a good Wi-Fi
and
signal
what
down there though, so I can still work.
And what excites you most about the future of the medtech industry?
Well, speaking as a consultant who has an awful lot of software as a medical device clients on my books, the use of um, software, the use of machine learning, the use of AI in the medical device market, all countries around the world are suffering from a shortage of appropriately qualified and experienced medical staff, can't recruit them, can't keep them. Funding is a nightmare. And, we've proven over the last 5 years, if not 10, that the technology exists to be able to take over a lot of the analytical work and diagnostic work. And it's now, we're now seeing that emerge more and more in the NHS, supported by this current government. And that will be an interesting way to go. I think appropriately controlled machine learning and AI programs will revolutionise the way in which healthcare is delivered. Um, doesn't mean to say there's not still some absolutely groundbreaking mechanical, hardware devices coming along as well, because there are. Um, so for me, it's really looking to see how the regulators manage their discomfort with the principle behind AI and allow it to actually achieve its full potential.
Nice. You're on mute.
I was just singing your praises on mute then. Yeah, I think there's so many takeaways from this conversation, whether it's consultants, whether it's people thinking about going out and starting their own business or have done and maybe navigating the market at the moment. I'm sure there's many people that hopefully will listen to this that have worked with you and know you and agree with all of our plaudits. But I just think the main thing is like you're just a great person as well. I think people enjoy working with you, and I think that's such a good thing to have as a consultant. Yes, we know we need a job doing, but we want to do it with someone that we can actually get on with. And I think you're the perfect mold of a consultant. So thank you very much. I think
Thank you.
we've taken some great lessons there, and yeah, the journey isn't finished, is it?
No,
No.
there's a few years left in me yet.
And obviously for the listeners today, if this has made you perhaps reflect on your own turning point and have a story to share, we'd love to hear from you. So please reach out. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, all of that, the usual stuff. And we look forward to seeing you back here on the next episode.
Thank you, Sam.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.